it's the same when you've gotten to a place of selfhood, wholeness, and healing to turn around and help other people also heal. And we are on the cusp of an exodus. There's going to be a massive cult break and deconstruction surge. And 10 years ago, there were no resources. Now there are resources. But that that surge is also individual human beings that we sit at the dinner table with, or we interact with at work. And so it is very I hate to use the church model of each one reach one, but it is a little bit like that, where healed people will have an impact on other healed people, and healed people will have the capacity to show grace and space to someone who's just breaking.
Hello, and welcome to the Shifting Culture podcast, in which we have conversations about the culture we create and the impact we can make. We long to see the body of Christ look like Jesus. I'm your host, Joshua Johnson. High control religion leaves a mark. And for a lot of people, leaving doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like standing in the middle of a field with no map and no idea who you actually are. So I sit down with Tia Levings, author of Her Well-Trained Wife, and her brand new book, I Belong to Me, to talk about what healing really looks like after high control religion and other controlling environments. We get into the steps before the steps. What has to happen before you could even say you want to be healed? We talk about how language can free you and how it can keep you stuck. We talk about the developmental milestones that get taken from you when a system needs you compliant. And we talk about what it looks like to finally become the main character in your own story. Tia is one of the best writers working right now, and this conversation is honest, it's grounded, it's worth your time. So join us. Here is my conversation with Tia Levings. Tia, welcome back to Shifting Culture. Excited to have you back on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's going to be fun.
Last time we talked, you walked us through A Well-Trained Wife, and you walked us through the escape.
Mm-hmm.
Now, thinking about this book, I Belong to Me, as you're walking through healing and recovery after high control religion, high control situations, and in any high control situation, and the trauma from that. If you could talk to yourself coming out of the escape, what would you like to know to say, this is really going to be helpful for you on your healing journey?
That's a great question. I came out of the most dire part of my experience in 2007, and there wasn't a lot available, even language, for what I'd lived through. Religious trauma, deconstruction, ex-evangelical, all the sources around that were still being developed. So I kind of healed in tandem with this movement's rise. And back then, what I needed to hear the most was that there was even hope that I could heal, because the attitude was, well, you've been really broken and you're probably going to stay really broken and you're just going to deal with this. Like, we didn't even have language around complex PTSD back then. And so the idea that you would be reactive and flicker, and fragile and easily triggered all of the time was just kind of an assumption. And I disagreed with that, with that should be the outcome of the rest of my life. And so I took a different approach, and that has informed a lot of this journey, is that I was committed to that different approach.
Your healing really coincided with the rise of really the place that you came out of. And we see it today, which we live in this crazy timeline
Mhm.
where you have people like Doug Wilson and Pete Hegseth and those that were in that space in prominence and speaking into the public. What is it like to see both sides, the healing and the rise of what you were healing from?
Yeah, it's every single day has the potential to be very activating. I'm so grateful that I have tools and I've done work in order to handle it, because I knew when I started to see that change politically in 2015, 2016, I was in some of the deepest trenches of my own recovery, but I could also see what was coming for us as a country and what it would look like to scale. And sometimes, like, you've heard people say, well, I know too much. Like, it felt that way, like, I know what's coming. I'm not in the dark about what this is gonna mean for everyone, and to watch it be platformed and to see it become popular and normalized comes with a fair amount of terror, and if I couldn't process that terror, I would be re-traumatized every single day. That's just the reality of what we live in.
I know the last time we talked, we touched a little bit on CBT and talk therapy and how it wasn't helpful to be basically re-traumatized and retell the story constantly. How do you help people not be stuck and be re-traumatized once they've gotten out?
For me, the swing really happened when I started noticing what was happening in my body, kind of independent from what was happening outside. And so this is true in recovery as like if I'm in a therapy modality, session, or if I'm just out and about and we're having this exhausting conversation about what, we're just inundated with the flood the zone kind of news headlines that are really upsetting and scary. If we can learn to recognize what's happening to us in that moment, and then we can do practical caretaking in that moment and build our self-awareness as to how that's impacting us and going through these steps of just really knowing ourselves and self-advocating. It's a lot of work shrunken into a little sentence, but if we can learn how to do that, that is how we get through those moments. And that's why I feel like CBT is a nice place to start, but if you are exhausted by talking about what happened to you and you actually feel worse afterward, it's that biofeedback that you use to say, okay, I need to do something else. And fortunately, there are a lot of something else's available. And sometimes those modalities are good for now, but they're not good for the long haul, or sometimes you can come back to them. For example, I could go to CBT right now and it would be a lot more helpful to me now than it was back then when I was still so raw and in shock and just not even ready to name what was happening, let alone hash it out for an hour and then go back to my, normal day. It just never worked back then. I had some clearing I had to do first.
So what does that clearing start to look like for people? How do you clear the junk out so that you can actually start to name what happened?
Yeah, that was a really dual process, and I think I hear that reflected back with other survivors. So, like, I Belong to Me, I should say, is really positioned as, yes, you're gonna get a glimpse into my journey, but it's shared with an intention that you will find merit for your own, that it'll help inform the choices you wanna make or not make, based on how it actually works. So I tried to be as transparent as possible, and so that process of learning the actual vocabulary for what my experience was its own step of, like, describing what happened and then realizing there was language with definitions that matched it, and then learning how to sit with some of those very uncomfortable words and labels and names and diagnoses. And then the other half of that is this kind of metabolic integration thing that you do where you realize, "Oh, I'm stuck. I don't feel well here," or I can't actually go into that room without breaking out in a full body sweat," or that metaphorical room. So I had situations and memories in my life I couldn't sit with without my heart pumping and my skin flushing and crying, or I couldn't encounter certain triggers in my active day-to-day life without it flashing me back. I had a big problem with flashbacks and nightmares for years. And so sometimes that's beyond language. And so there are modalities like EMDR, like brain spotting, like somatic awareness that take you, they're not dependent on the language model in order to help you identify what's happening. And so working with those in tandem has been the power pill, basically of like the dual approach that's really worked.
That's interesting because language itself can be freeing, but can also be really harmful, and it
Mhm.
could put you into a box. Any cults or high control religion or high control situations, they're going to use specific language to be able to keep you stuck.
Mhm.
I was reflecting earlier today, I think on John 5. There was a man in the pool of Bethesda. Jesus walks by him and he asks him a question. He says, "Do you want to be healed?" And that question stuck with me. I think because it does something. If you are healed, that means that you are going to have a brand new story. You're going to have to use new language so that you can set things apart from who you were to who you are going to be. That piece of
Mhm.
healing, of saying, yes, I want to be healing, can be really scary. How can you help people? How did you say, I actually want a new story? I don't want to be stuck where I am. How do you navigate the yes, I want to be healed part?
This is a great question. This has not come up in any interview, and I'm so glad you asked it because the first 3 chapters of, I Belong to Me deal with the steps before the steps. Before like, you might even be kind of aware that you want to heal, but you're so overwhelmed with what it will take that it's very hard to admit to it. Yeah, I'm willing to do that work. You may feel so wounded that someone telling you that you need to do work or you need to want to heal feels like victim blaming. There's things that can keep you very paralyzed that come way before you're ready to say, "I want this." And so I have a chapter on audacity, how to develop audacity for yourself. I have a chapter on centrality because it's hard when you have no sense of self and you've given your life away to other people forever and habitually and theologically to say, "Actually, I'm the main character in my own story. I'm the central character here, and I need to do things to help my protagonist advance and develop agency." A boring book is a book where the character doesn't do anything. So, learning that you are the protagonist of your own story is a step by itself, and you have to be willing to at least allow for it to move to the next step. And if these become micro steps, that's okay. Like, there's no metric of pacing, there's no time clock. You just, sit in each step for as long and you take all the time that you need. I have all these mantras, in each chapter where they're meant to be affirming and space clearers so that if you need to take a long time in a certain phase, you can. There's no comparison here. It's up to you.
I kind of like mixed up a little bit of that healing question I wanted to get to, and then I wanted
Mhm.
to talk about language because
Yeah.
language is really important. And I think when people leave, their maybe the veil is lifted, they finally see what is happening in this control. They want to get out and move. Sometimes language is limiting for them because that's all that they know. They know the language of
Mhm.
their story, of where they grew up, of what high control religion does. And they move to another place and they want to be safe
Uh-huh.
in the language that they know. What happens to people sometimes? Do you see people moving from like cult to cult,
Yes.
or moving from one place to another, but they're really similar, even if they feel a little bit different from the outset?
This is really nuanced and it's really important to understand because there is a tendency when you're that vulnerable, you've left a toxic environment, probably with abuse, probably with, control, a lot of binaries and rigidity, a jump into the unknown to say, okay, I'm going to step away from that. And people do that in stages too. Like it might be very hard to say, I'm willing to ask questions about my faith, but I need to still call myself a Christian. I need to not let go of that label. Sometimes that's the side of the pool, like I don't think you can do an investigation if you've already know the destination, but not everyone's ready for that right away. They need baby steps, and that's okay. So this idea that you find comfort in language is a two-sided coin. It can also hurt you. It can also hold you back. It can also misdiagnose or send different stories in your head, as you step into different identities. So it's again, I think it comes down to pacing. It comes down to understanding that this is a journey. It's not a step that you stay in. So you'll outgrow it. Your next little step is something you'll outgrow and you'll move on to the next one. Just knowing that there are other potentials out there sometimes can be both freeing and scary. But language is also used to control and keep us back. And this idea of cult hopping or falling for another high control dynamic is so rampant in part because that's what your nervous system knows how to respond to. So if you like are very focused on blaming the other people who hurt you, that's a valid place in the journey. We all spend a lot of time blaming all of the externals. And at some point, it's just like the verse in John you just quoted. At some point, you have to set the blame aside enough to stand up or to move or to follow. And that hinge, that pivot is also a step that doesn't all happen all at one time. Like one of the things I really hoped to bring out in I Belong to Me is that these are broken down into concepts and steps and stages that we adapt to. It's not and then I got up and walked. you know, there's a process involved. And we get something out of blaming people, and there is a stage for blaming people, and there's a stage for accountability and investigations and reporting and things like that. And then you have to not stay there forever. Like, that's not the whole story. So when you're done with that part or ready to step away from that part into, okay, now what can I do? There's things there too. And that I think has been missing from the landscape quite a bit is like you can move into that space and you're not blaming victims. You're not saying it's my fault or this happened to say that it's my responsibility to heal from what happened.
That goes into, I think, part of your chapter there on identity formation. When you're formed early on in this high control environments, you have a identity, and I know you've had an identity that your story was really the system and the environment that you grew up in. And it wasn't like, who is Tia? And it was hard to know who Tia was underneath that system.
Mhm.
When you grow up and grow in a fear-based identity formation, how do you get to a place to say, I belong to me, or I know who Tia is? What does that like reconstruction of identity look like? Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening and thank you for supporting the show. If you'd like to support the show and get early ad-free episodes, you go to Substack at shiftingculture.substack.com. And with your subscription, you could have a private podcast feed in your podcast app where you get to download early episodes before anybody gets to listen to them. You could also support the show by going to the support the show link at the bottom of the show notes in the app that you're using right now. That goes to a page that supports the work my wife and I do around the world. That donation is also tax deductible. So if you want a tax deductible donation, you could go there. Or if you want to support the show by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that really helps new listeners find the show as well. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support. And thank you so much for supporting this work so that we could see the body of Christ look more like Jesus.
For me, and I was so excited to discover this, and I don't know if it will be this way for everyone, but it definitely was, and I see it reflected in other survivors sharing their stories. The idea that we can pick back up and redevelop is a mind blow. Like, wow, like we missed it. Anyone who's been indoctrinated in a high control system missed healthy child development because those are at odds with one another. If they're trying to indoctrinate and churn out a predictable result, a uniform result, they're not allowing the individual to develop as they should. And so when I discovered what child development's supposed to look like, what human development looks like throughout our lifetimes, it gave me a lot of hope because I realized, okay, I didn't differentiate as a teenager the way I was supposed to, but I can still learn how to differentiate. And I didn't learn how to like try on different identities for size or find my way to what I really like, but I can do that in adulthood. So in a lot of ways, A Well-Trained Wife, the book that came before, is I'll call a coming of age kind of story late in life, you know? And it's hope giving to me that we can do that. Our we have neuroplasticity, we have the ability to regrow, we can be really targeted in the things like we don't get our time back, we don't get our youth back, of course not. But it doesn't have to be a sentence that impacts us for the rest of our lives. We can grow and learn as long as we have, like no real health issue with our brain that's keeping us from doing that.
What are some of these stages of development
Mhm.
that people miss if they're in these types of situations?
A big one is adolescence because in high control patriarchy, they kind of skip adolescence altogether. You go into puberty and you are ready for adulthood, and they start calling you young women and young men, and you don't go through the stages. They start shaming the things that child psychologists and research and time has taught us teenagers need to be doing as their brain develops till they're 25. In Christian patriarchy, you're already married and having children by the time you're 25. So your future's already foreclosed before your brain has really caught up to what it's supposed to be doing in order to have that autonomy and agency in adulthood. Because patriarchy doesn't want you to have autonomy and agency, and so it's on purpose. So it wasn't a surprise to me to be 33. I mean, I was surprised, but now it's not a surprise that I was 33 when I escaped and I didn't have the brain of a 33-year-old. I had the brain of more like a 19, 20-year-old I knew how to do a lot of practical things in the house, but I didn't know how the world worked, and I didn't know who I was. And hear from people in their 50s and 60s who reflect the same thing, because they were modeled and indoctrinated to become this one thing. And so they can't even tell you where they wanna eat for dinner because they don't know what they like, If you ask them a question, they paralyze. They don't know what they like, who they are without something, without a label or without an identity that's found in the group. So, it's terrifying, and I think this is where science and research really help us. We have this unprecedented time in human history where we have access to all of this stuff. And we also have access to all the outcomes of the things we've been doing for the past 50 years. So when ideologists speak up and they say, this is how it's supposed to be for teenagers, we can actually hear from those adults now and say, did that work for you? How many of those how many worked? How many benefited from true love waits? Let's find out.
The great thing is we have all of this information. This is what I struggle with in my life is I have information. I just struggle with actually implementing it in
Mhm.
my life.
Sure.
It's just a struggle. It's like, okay, I know the right steps. I know what to do. I know, and then I don't do it, and then I shame myself for
Mm.
not doing it, and I just get stuck. I get stuck in a shame spiral
Yeah.
usually because I can't get from knowledge to implementation.
Yeah.
What helps people in this get from knowledge to implementation?
Yeah, this that information overload. So this is another thing where I hope my sharing my experience helps someone else because that's how I learned about it was other people sharing their experience. What I discovered in my 40s and 50s is that I'm pretty neurodivergent. And so when I focused on why do I get stuck when I'm overwhelmed with information? Instead of shaming myself for that, just understanding my brain has too much information to process right now. And that's fair because we're flooded with it right now. There's so much out there. And the medium of delivery matters. If I'm getting it through my phone is different than if I'm reading it in a book. I have to take practical steps to simplify my life. It's very much like a buffet table saying, no, I'm actually going to only get, a meat and three, or something like that. So I can put it into a sequence and process it in time. And if it takes me a little more time, it's still forward motion. It's still better than feeling overwhelmed and shut down. So I look at that shutdown itself as the thing I need to understand. It's not the information's fault. It's not my brain's fault for not being able to process too much. What can I do about shutdown? And that's what helps me move out of the cycle. If I do one thing today, it's better than doing nothing for 5 days. So baby steps, gentleness, grace, kindness to my system, understanding that I can't self-exploit. I come from a capitalist religion that exploits human beings. Like they use it up and then they move on to the next generation and they keep refreshing the system that way. And it uses people up. And I don't want to do that to myself, which is what happens when I get in those shame cycles. My own various previous parts are saying you're a failure, you should have done that better. Look at you, messing up. I still this morning had one because, I Belong to Me is a big thick book. There's a lot in here. It gave me a lot of paper, a lot of word count, and it's still there are things I wish I had put in there. And it's like, Tia, it's not possible to write the end all be all. It's a time capsule and it's gonna help people that didn't have these things 10 years ago. But it's not a perfect book and it's not supposed to be a perfect book.
That's good. Give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect book, but it is a wonderful book. And I think that a lot of people will find themselves in it. And whether or not you grew up in like high control religion system, we get to actually see some of this play out right here on a national stage
That's right.
where we're being traumatized
And at the
and
time
and some
yeah.
things and trying to be controlled. As you saw something on a micro scale that you are now seeing on a macro scale,
Mhm.
what helps move from, hey, this happened to me and my church system, my family system, into this is happening in the nation? Maybe we as a larger collective need to actually bump up against this, speak out, and like try to live a different story. How do we move from that
Mhm.
micro to the macro level in these big systems?
I think it's going to replicate to scale the same way that it did on the way up. Like we have this household model of patriarchy, and they strategically applied it to our whole country so that we are all living under the influence of Christian fundamentalism now. We are all being inundated with religious trauma. And so recovery is going to look like each one of us in the cells, the individual people that make up that collective, doing our own work where we can, helping others with theirs, and joining our voices. I really feel like, this is also popular in 12-step programs that you turn around and help the ones behind you on the 12th step. And it's the same when you've gotten to a place of selfhood, wholeness, and healing to turn around and help other people also heal. And we are on the cusp of an exodus. There's going to be a massive cult break and deconstruction surge. And 10 years ago, there were no resources. Now there are resources. But that that surge is also individual human beings that we sit at the dinner table with, or we interact with at work. And so it is very I hate to use the church model of each one reach one, but it is a little bit like that, where healed people will have an impact on other healed people, and healed people will have the capacity to show grace and space to someone who's just breaking. When we're recording this today, Tucker Carlson issued an apology yesterday, and there's a huge outcry against it because they want to know that's not even a real apology. If he says he didn't do it intentionally, he absolutely did do it intentionally. But that isn't the point. To me, the point of Tucker's apology is that he's creating space for his fans for them to change their mind. And that is what really matters, is that space to let somebody get there in the pace that they need to get there. It's hard. It hurts. There's real consequences involved in the choices that they made. But if we are truly healthier, then we have the capacity to say, I know I've been there too. Here's some time. Here's some things that might help you. I'm here to accept you and answer your questions without making excuses for what they did, what they participated in. We have a big population collective reckoning coming. We did something that other countries spent years deconstructing. Nazi Germany had to do a lot of repair work, and they're still working on it. I think we are facing a similar American reckoning.
How do you give people permission to change their mind if they have, say, somebody has caused some sort of harm,
Mhm.
and like a major figure has caused harm? How do
Yes.
you help, say, yourself say, okay, maybe they can change their mind, maybe they will change their mind, or they have changed their mind, and we give them grace to be on a journey
Mhm.
that maybe, takes responsibility for what they have done, but also then say, oh, I was wrong. Can we move into a place where we can, I don't know, give grace to people, let people change their mind, give people permission to
Mhm.
change their mind?
I think we can, with boundaries and accountability. It's not
Yeah.
all puffy glitter and rainbows. They still have to be held into account for what they did, and when there was real harm committed and crimes committed, those things need to be dealt with. And you can always embark on your personal journey in prison if that's what's called for. Um, you know, that's totally valid. I have a permanent restraining order against somebody who means me harm, but I don't hold them to a standard that doesn't allow them to change their mind. I have just put a boundary upon their ability to hurt me while they're on that journey.
I think that's such a helpful distinction. Help people figure out what boundaries are healthy and flourishing for you, and
Yeah.
what boundaries that were maybe put upon you that were not healthy, that were limiting. How do we distinguish between healthy, flourishing boundaries and unhealthy ones?
Yeah, I dealt with boundaries a lot, and I belong to me in graduated form, because when you are first learning, like, for example, I came from a pretty boundless place. I came from high control, external rigidity, an external moral compass, and rules that I had to follow. You take that away, you don't suddenly have the internal structure to know what is a healthy boundary. So, and I was, conditioned to not have any boundaries. I couldn't say no to men. I couldn't self assert or stick up for myself or self advocate in any way like that. So I had to first develop baby words, baby talk for boundaries, which might sound like, ouch. It's simple words like that hurts. Just identifying this is something that's harmful that I don't want in my life is the very first bud of a boundary. Boundaries are not about controlling other people. They're not about rigid rules that will break everything if you break them. Like they'll shatter. That's a tell that your boundary has become a rule. But I also, as I grew and developed and got stronger, found a lot of power in flipping the narrative around boundaries to what I can do, what my capacity reflects, what's for me, what's instead of always like, you can't do this, or I can't go there, or I can't, that constant negativity was actually nudging me back into high control because I'm a naturally a person who is very familiar with fundamentalism. I find comfort in high control. It's very clarifying. It's very safe feeling if there's tight rules. And health is the opposite. Health is flex and growth and tolerance and capacity. So when I want to stay in a soft place, I got to keep really organic, breathable, permeable boundaries that are still very effective, like our skin. Our skin is permeable, but also it's pretty, contained. I'm not bleeding everywhere. And so I love that metaphor. Like sometimes we'll just look at my hands and be like, it's also keeping me inside me. My boundaries, my skin doesn't have anything to do with you. You can't even, touch it because we're through a screen. But you're not looking at a bloody person because of the skin. So when I think of that, I'm like, okay, what can I do? What is for me? Is this book for me? Is this book not for me? It's not really a reflection of the book. It's a reflection of what I need in my life right now. If someone wants me to do something that really makes me really uncomfortable and it's causing me a nervous system collapse, that's not for me. It doesn't even matter if it's a good thing. It can be a great thing. They can mean well. But if it's not sustainable in my system, it's not for me. And so speaking that way is my boundary of that's not for me. And it really changed how I looked at boundaries. And it also was like not something I could have done in the beginning. I was in shock for a long time and vulnerable for a long time and finding the baby steps of how to get my way through this for years. So, that's it's a little bit of a spiral sequence, and I don't know how evident that is to the reader because of the different versions the book went through, but in the beginning, it was like boundaries 1, boundaries 2, boundaries 3, because there is a process for making and holding.
In your book, you redefine and re-narrate coffee chats. Like,
Mhm.
we're going to take you to coffee.
Yeah.
In some places, coffee means you're going to get scolded and it's going to be
Yes.
tough. But you actually have a good coffee chat, and like let's actually have
Yes.
a good conversation, and it's going to be whole and healthy. So
Mhm.
if you would have this flourishing good coffee chat with somebody as they're navigating their boundaries, as they're saying, I don't know what's good and healthy for me at the moment. Like,
Mhm.
what are some questions to ask the person to help them? Let's try to navigate what are good, healthy boundaries for you at this moment.
What exactly is an American evangelical? Where did the movement come from? And how did it become one of the most powerful forces in American life?
Hi, I'm Dan Hummel. I'm a historian of evangelicals, foreign policy, theology, and related topics.
I'm John Fia. I have written about American evangelicalism in 3 centuries over the course of 6 books, 18th, 19th, and 20th.
I'm Maggie Capra. I'm a teacher, researcher, and I consider myself a forever student of American evangelicalism.
This is the history that shaped a movement and a nation. American Evangelicals, a history podcast.
I love that. It's so individual, but it also is like this giant step back because what they might need most of all is a timeout and some time to think and hear themselves think. And what immediately comes up then is the things that you're going to have to say no to in order to provide that for yourself means that you have to be able to say that and not feel like you have to over explain or apologize for the reason why you need a retreat. So understanding that it's valid to say, I'm not actually sure what's right for me, I need to pause, is a boundary. And when you say it, that's all you have to say. You don't have to say, "Oh, because I'm overwhelmed right now," or "I'm really tired," or "I'm just not coping well," or, "I'm really confused." You don't have to add any of that. You can just speak your limit and say, "I need a pause." That allows your self voice to come in, which I feel is really important. I tried to write a self-help book that's not prescriptive. It's very hard to do that. But what I wanted to do was carve space so that you can hear yourself think, not Tia's voice, not your mom's voice, not anybody else's voice. And space is the only way I know to do that. So sometimes boundaries means you're drawing a circle around yourself so that you can hear your own voice and also honor it and know that there's nothing wrong with it. If you're not where someone else thinks you need to be, that's invalid. you need to be there when you're ready to be there. And what will it take for you to be ready? That's also a valid conversation. So it's a circle back to the body over and over and over again for me, because I don't want to feel dragged, forced, coerced, pressed, pressured in any way to move faster at the pace that I need to, which directly points to trauma. Trauma is anything that came on too hard, too fast, and you couldn't process it. So that's my line on trauma. I need to take time that I need in order to get there. And I usually get there. And sometimes I'm faster than everyone else, but it's that permission that keeps me sustained.
How do you do that with others? Because if you're
Mhm.
having this boundary around you, you have the space, you're figuring it out. I
Mhm.
know that some therapists have really helped you
Yeah.
walk through these spaces. Like, what is a healthy way for people to do it with other people
Yeah.
that gives people space as well?
I love this question too. You're asking great ones today.
Thanks.
Some of this is I'm just now learning in the last couple years because I have a trauma-informed partner and we talk this way all the time. And it makes me reflect back on how different it would have been raising children with this language available. And was when you live in community with someone else, you're gonna rub up against, conflicting needs, conflicting paces, pressure, the need to everyone get in the car and let's go, whether you're ready or not, that kind of stuff. And it's very mundane sometimes. But what we practice here, I love. It's working really well. I don't expect him to read my mind. So if I need to go at a slower pace, I need to actually verbalize, I need a minute. If I need to go a different way, or if I need to be the one that drives today, it's on me to communicate my needs. If I'm unable to communicate my needs, he knows my signs and he can watch for them. But I also want to be like, whoa, I feel myself getting overwhelmed. Let me take a minute. So it's a lot of self responsibility, which I ironically find empowering because I can take care of myself and I can. Also knowing like when you're in community with someone else and they're the ones that need the time, they need more time, they need a different pace, they need different language, they don't know how to name their feelings, those kinds of things. I can recognize really easily now that that's not about me. I don't have to take it personally. I don't have to carry it or enable it. I can give them all the time that they need and I can go do something else. Or I can go to the thing myself or like there's in partnership and in family support, which I think is just so beautiful on a community model. The more we're self-aware, the more we're able to communicate our self-awareness and that only helps relationships. It helps you keep your side of the street clean. It helps you take responsibility for your own choices and actions. But then you have that increased capacity to give to someone else who maybe is having a hard time putting it into words or, getting the job done.
As you're walking through, I'm thinking about my wife and I. I'm an internal processor, and
Mhm.
I have conversation with myself a lot. And
Yeah.
so sometimes I think that I actually verbalized my need to my wife, and apparently I didn't say anything, but I said it to myself. help
Yeah.
me, help me be
Uh-huh.
able to actually communicate and not think that I already did because I've been internally processing
As someone
what
who
I need.
has a constant internal chatter, I get that so well. And also, I've just learned to say it out loud. "Oh, I probably only said that in my head. I'm sorry." And it's just practice learning to say, like, "Did I really say that to you, or did I just dream that?"
Thanks. Hopefully I'll get much better in this. You talked about this self-help book that is like more free and you're having a conversation with people and like you're giving people space, and it's not a framework that is like, here are the 5 steps to
Right.
healing and I'm going to give you, and you just do these 5 steps and you're good. What is the difference then between a like fundamentalist framework where this is the rigidity of it, and then
Mhm.
like a flourishing framework for people
Mm.
to flourish within even what you have here?
Yeah. Yeah. So my basic definition, my little shorthand that I carry with me of fundamentalism is people, ideas before people. The ideological purity is so much more important than the person. And when I flip that and I say, no, actually, humans are more important than the ideology, that puts the priority back into what each individual does. So then, when if the fundamentalist approach is, lined out set of steps and stages you're going to take in order to achieve this ideal promise. And that if anything goes wrong with it, it's the user's fault. I wanted to, obviously completely avoid that. But a lot of self-help is here's your 10 steps. Here's your big prosperity promise at the end. And I'm saying hope is available. There are options that can help you heal. There's a menu available to you. Here's space for you to weigh if that's going to work for you. But there isn't a promise other than like the hope, the solidarity, the friendship you're going to find along the way, the grace and space, the room for it. But it is really hard to write self-help without telling people what to do. And so I pulled on my doula experience extensively and also my mother experience. So there is advice in the book. I do give advice, but it's an option that you're free to take or leave, and it's always with that disclaimer of take what you like and leave the rest. Some of this is not going to apply to you, especially when it feels really gendered. There's I know that I'm not speaking directly to men all of the time because I'm a woman speaking to other women, but there are men that have reflected back. They got so much out of it. So I know when that moment where I'm like, okay, I did the thing where here's the advice, here's the options, here's what's available, customize it to your own life. Because I'm not here to tell you what to do or promise you that if you do this, you're going to get this shiny, happy response. That's not how it works. Your life is your life, and your success is going to look like your success. And we're all coming at it from different places too. So we don't even share the same starting point. It's, we're coming at it from all different places.
Previously in the conversation, we were talking about the macro level. We were talking about the nation. We're talking about there's going to be a reckoning, and there's a reckoning coming, and we're all going to be deconstructing. And so I want to know what helpful deconstruction looks like. You had a deconstruction doula. And so what is helpful deconstruction if we're all going to be exiting some of this soon, hopefully? What does that look like? How do we do it well?
That's a great question because there's some different schools of thought. I can tell you mine. I don't believe that you can openly question anything if you've already decided what the answer has to be. So I really think it starts at the beginning with being able to ask why safely, asking why and being in an environment where you're not going to be booted or kicked out or exiled for asking questions or having unpopular opinions. I think being open to people who live through the world radically different ways, being able to sit with them and not feel threatened by them is part of deconstruction. Understanding certainly the cerebral breakdown of what you believe is important, but you can also be aware that staying in that cerebral place can be its own deflection and its own way not to actually get into the outcomes and real fruits of something. And I think fruit inspection is vitally important. It's very biblical. We know them by their fruits. And you can't be defending the cognitive or rational, intelligent type defense of something if you're dealing with bad fruit. You have to find out what's actually causing this bad fruit and be open to the causes. And so that constant openness is really a big part of deconstruction. I also don't believe you are obligated to reconstruct anything that's a belief system that's according to a system. That's why I said system. It's your reconstruction is going to look like an inner integrity. And that isn't set to a code of any kind. It's not necessarily tied to a group that requires your belief to make you belong. It's individual and it's your inner character. And I think we have a lot of inner character to rebuild. But then also deconstruction should lead outward. Once you get through your own, beliefs, your own values, your own integrity, look at systems, look at decolonization, look at how the greater world is impacted and how the systems you participated in are still, working their havoc, through the world. It's growth and it's ongoing. So I think deconstruction never stops. And there are a lot of people who want to speak about deconstruction as if it's this finite window of time. You're going to ask questions for 5 years and then be ready to move on. And I can't with that. That's okay, that's getting to another plateau and staying there. No, thank you. I've learned that lesson in my life multiple times.
So you don't want to stay at a plateau. So you continue to ask questions. I mean, it's great to be able to continue to say, we're constantly asking questions. We can't ever get to the depth and mystery of the universe
Right.
or the creator. Like you can't get there. Like
Right.
it's so deep.
I
So
love that.
there's constant questions that need to be asked. And it's not actually our job and role and responsibility to have it all figured out. And that's one thing I like about what the Christian faith is supposed to be, is that
Mhm.
there's mystery involved.
Yes.
And we're holding on to mystery. And it's not a like, have everything figured out. So I have
Mhm.
all the answers in the world. And so I know how it works. And if you don't come to my space, then
Right.
you're evil and wrong. And it's going to be hellfire for you. So forget you.
That's such
It's
a
only
boring,
on
small
me.
way to live, and it makes
It
God
is.
really small. The Christian walk is a walk. You're walking with the divine in the expansive, universe. Of course, there has to be mystery. I found so much freedom in that. Calvinism and tight, high control religion was boring at some point because I was like, "Well, why bother if we have it all figured out?" Like, this is way not a fun way to live. I don't like it.
So what is walking with mystery like for you? I know one of the things that you do that I really resonate with, that I do, is like going out in nature, being in creation, going on walks. Like
Yeah.
if I could be out on a walk in the woods every day, like that would be like, that's
Yeah.
heaven for me. Like it's amazing. What is it like, just like in a practice for you, like being out in creation? What does that look like and what does that do for your body and for your soul?
I love that question because I think it's like one of the most intuitive things I've ever done in my life. I was a wandering kid. And so I love daydreaming. I love wandering. I love interacting with the seasons and taking myself out of anything that's man made or artificial or forced, contrived, and getting back to the basics, having that time with nature and feeling the planet breathe and understanding there's a pacing, a natural pacing to life and connecting in silence and just reducing the amount of noise around us is so important. I also really love breaking habits. Sometimes this can be as simple as like if you always put your toothbrush in your mouth on the right side, try it on the other side one day and just see what that does in your brain. Like immediately throws you off your game and makes me wonder. And that's what I'm always looking for is like, where can I stay in a state of wonder? That means shaking up what I'm reading or switching genres. I love science fiction for this because science fiction as a genre is embraces wonder and curiosity and what ifs. And I find that just fascinating. And if I can stay in those higher curiosities, I'm less likely to fall prey to something that's gonna try and put me into a box. So it's not predator insurance, but it's pretty close to it because you're not in a state of fear. You're in your higher awareness. You are safe. Your creature needs are met, that's why it's so hard for us to get outside. We spend this time in our culture, like slaving away at the rat race, which chips away at the very thing that's gonna help us have some armor against the threats out there. Is we have to be able to hear ourselves and know ourselves and hear what's going on really in our system and our body and all around us and be at one with creation that way. Yeah, if I can just be barefoot on the grass sometimes, I can't maybe get a whole walk in, but I can touch dirt. Like there's a whole meme about go touch grass. Like that's not bullshit. You should go touch grass.
You should. My son's been saying it. He's 8. He's like,
Yeah.
sitting doing something. He's like, I need to go touch grass.
Yes,
So
that's good awareness.
it
Go
is.
breathe some fresh air. I remember
Uh-huh.
this temper tantrum I threw once in my 20s where I realized, like, if I wasn't mindful about it, it was possible for me to go from my house to my car on concrete to a concrete, parking lot, into a mall, back into my car, and have never touched the planet at any time. And that was like, "Okay, that's not okay. I don't wanna spend whole weeks and years of my life not touching actual planet."
You mentioned one thing is breaking habits of doing something different that actually brings you into wonder and curiosity of seeing
Mhm.
something different. Is there anything else to help us pay attention so that we can like notice the wonder that's all around us that we miss every day?
Yeah, I love the pause. I do this with my scroll sometimes too. Like it's really easy to just like scroll past really fast and go through 500 emotions in a split second, like because their our algorithms mix everything up and I'm like, "Oh, I'm grieving. Oh, I'm happy. Oh, there's a cat." And sometimes I will hold it and make myself watch something 3 times just to really see what that content is. It's all for me, it's a lot about slowing down. That's a constant theme. So, if I can have somebody, "Can you say that again? I didn't quite catch that. Let me hear that." Or active listening where I'm actually reframing it back to them. It's a great exercise because it helps your relationship and communication too. Not centering yourself in something and saying, "Okay, I'm just gonna take in what I'm hearing and observing, and I'm gonna name it. I'm in a room with tan walls and I hear a garbage truck and I'm talking to Joshua." Like knowing to be able to clock those things already brings my nervous system down here because it's awareness and it all comes down to me for awareness. Which is why sensitivity and sense awareness is also such a superpower because you can, know where you are in the world and how you're moving through it and who with. It's just an immediate way to combat what the world wants us to do, where we're just racing through our experiences and dissociated half the time or most of the time, and not really engaging in our life. This is our lifetime. We only get one.
We only get one. Let's live our life.
Yeah. It takes intentionality.
It does. This book, I Belong to Me, it's fantastic, Tia. It's
Thank
so
you.
good. What is your hope for your readers? What do you hope that this book gives to people?
That they find space to have their own experience and step into the calling of their own lives.
Perfect. That's great. I would
Mhm.
love a recommendation or two from you. Anything you've been reading or watching lately you could recommend?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me task switching is sometimes tricky, but I'm really enjoying I love Paradise. I just finished Paradise. I'm in the middle of DTF, St. Louis. Might not be everybody's cup of tea. I love Love on the Spectrum. I'm reading, is it called Heart the Lover? It's really blowing me away right now. And I'm very excited about this book, Everything in Color, graphic. It's a graphic memoir. Look how thick it is. It's all comic book art,
Amazing.
which is completely new to me. I have not spent any time, and this is by Stephanie Stalvey, and it's her story of religious trauma and recovery after purity culture. But this is a new format for my ADHD. I'm very excited about it, and I'm in full planning for the book tour and stuff. So, just being connected with my fellow humans and really listening to what the needs of our changing culture are. I feel like we're in the middle of a massive we're in the not in the middle of it. We're at the very precipice of a massive cultural shift as a lot of people step away or wake up, and being ready for that and speaking to it without shame is, top of my list every day.
And it's so good. You can see it starting to turn and move. People are like, oh,
Oh,
oops.
yeah. Oops, we didn't like that.
No,
This ain't what we
that's
want.
not good. We
You
didn't
know?
want it at all. This is not right. So
No, and "I
we're
told you so" only works so many times. "I told
yes.
you so" is not always helpful.
Yes, yes. So we need people like you to figure out like how do we actually help people as
Mhm.
they walk through what is coming, the reckoning, the walking away, the saying, "Oh, we got duped."
Yeah,
And I didn't know that we got duped and I was wrong.
right.
And so yeah, that's that's good. Hopefully we could start to see something like that happen sooner rather than later. Um,
People who wanna look at the big collective and feel discouraged that enough of it's not happening yet, you can look closer to home and you will see it in your own
yes.
circles. Like, there are people near you who are grappling with questions and shame and shyness and
Yeah.
fear, and they don't know what to do or where to go because they didn't know they were part of an ideological cult.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I Belong to Me is fantastic, and people can go and get that anywhere books are sold out May 5th, everywhere. So go and get I Belong to Me. How can people connect with you? Where would you like to point people to? so that they get more of what you're putting out there.
Yeah, it's super easy to find. I'm on almost all the social platforms at Tia Levings Writer. And my Substack is tialevings.substack.com. And I do more active deconstruction of our headlines and our current events over there. I'm also getting ready to share behind the scenes and bonus content from both books on my Substack. So if you read it and want more, that's where you'll find it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tia. This was fantastic. Really encourage people to go get I Belong to Me, and really, really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for your work. Continue to just step out, speak out, and be a voice that many people need at the moment. So thank you for everything that you do. This was
Thank you so much.
fantastic.
Thank you. This was great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Shifting Culture. This show was edited and produced by me, Joshua Johnson, at Shifting Culture Productions. If you're enjoying the conversations, consider supporting the work by subscribing at shiftingculture.substack.com. For as little as $5 a month, you'll get ad-free early access episodes and other exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox. I'd love for you to not just listen, but engage. Reach out. Share what's resonating, and let's keep shaping culture together. Whether you're a listener with feedback, a creative with an idea, or a brand looking to connect with a thoughtful, engaged audience, let's talk. If you're interested in advertising on the show, I'd love to hear from you. Contact me directly for rates and availability. Until next time, let's keep shifting culture.